I grew up eating a lot of fast food, and at school I was never the athletic kid. I'd always be the one who, if he had the excuse to, I'd sit out of swimming or physical education, and I'd be one of those kids who never really liked exercise. If people were playing football, I wouldn't be playing, and I just kept eating more and more fast food as I grew up, and between the ages of about 12 and 14, I'd eat it almost every single day, these deep fried massive meals, 5,000 calories, and I wasn't exercising, so I'd just keep putting on weight and more weight and more weight, and by the time I was 14, I was obese, and I had about 40% body fat, and I just did not like the way that I looked. So I knew something had to change, and I started going to the gym. I started doing cardio, I started doing machines, but I didn't really have a structure, I didn't really have a program, and I didn't know the things that would let me progress the most that I could. And I had these expectations that if I kept going to the gym that I'd get an awesome physique and I'd lose loads of weight, and that these exercises, that these were enough, and if I just started having fewer calories, if I ate less, then that would be enough. But I had these unrealistic expectations and I lacked knowledge, so that meant that I lost motivation and I wasn't able to be consistent. So there were quite a few periods like this when, without having enough knowledge, I'd go to the gym for a few months because I'd been motivated by how I felt. I knew that something had to change. As a 14-year-old, you should be full of energy, not someone who's overweight, someone who struggles to walk up the stairs, right? You should be someone with a lot of energy. So you have these moments of motivation upon realizing how you feel, but in not getting the progress that you want, you lose that motivation and you lose consistency. So there are a few times like this where I lost consistency and I was going for maybe 20 to 50 workouts, which is still good, of course it is. But after that time, I didn't see the progress that I wanted, so I stopped being consistent. By going to the gym and by learning things, by making mistakes, I was able to make a lot more progress. But if you can save yourself from making those mistakes, and if you can save a bunch of time, then you'll be able to make a lot more progress. And of course, you need to make mistakes along the process. But I've done now over 500 workouts. I've been training consistently for over a year, and before that there were a lot of spells of inconsistent training, but altogether that comes to over 500 workouts. I've learned many things in that time, and if you're a beginner, the things we're going to discuss in this video, it could save you months. You'll learn a lot of things, and even if you're intermediate or a bit more advanced, there'll still be some things hopefully of value to you. And if not, then I ask you, please dislike this video because I want this to be of value to you. So consistency. You can start off small, you don't have to be that big with it. But going once a week, for example, and then twice a week and 3 times a week, it helps to be consistent if you see that progress, if you learn the right things. That's what this video is about. But you can also increase your consistency by improving your mental state, because if you do more good habits like meditation and journaling, it's easier to add another one in. And if you have better mental health, it's easier to be motivated, because if you have higher baseline dopamine, your motivation for things will just naturally be higher. So implement more and more good habits, the gym included or exercise included, and you'll be able to be a lot more consistent. But how frequently should you be going, right? Well, build up to it, but about 3 to 6 times a week in terms of the gym is a really good place to be. And you can divide this up. So there's what's called a training split. Anyone who's a little bit more advanced or intermediate, you'll know exactly what this means, but for anyone who's a complete beginner, this will be really useful information. So a training split is how you split up the exercises that you do. So there's a few that I'd recommend. If you're doing it 3 times a week, you can do full body. So all that is pretty simple. You just work out your whole body 3 times a week. So you could do it on Monday, you could rest, and then you could do it on Wednesday, then you could rest, and then you could do it on Friday. So that's a 3-day split. A 4-day split could be something like upper, lower. So you do upper body, say on Monday, then you do lower body on Tuesday, then you rest, then you do upper body again on Thursday, then you do lower body again on Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday you just rest. So that's another split that you can do. You can also do push-pull legs. Push-pull legs is 3 days on, 1 day off. Push is chest, shoulders and triceps. Pull is back and biceps, and legs is legs, right? So that's a good way to divide up your volume. So you can do push-pull legs, rest, push-pull legs. So that's about 5 or 6 times a week. Another kind of split in that same sort of format, 3 days on, 1 day off, is the Arnold split. So you can do chest and back, shoulders and arms, and then you do legs. So that's the Arnold split. So you can do chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, rest, chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, and then rest. So it's about 8-day split, 8 days of doing things, 3 days on, 1 day off. And these are good ways to split things up. A bro split I wouldn't really recommend. What that means is you just go crazy on like one muscle group. So you just do chest and then back, and then arms and then legs. You just like do one muscle group a day, but I wouldn't really recommend that. Something you can do is combine them. So you could do push-pull legs, then rest, and then you could do upper body, lower body. Or you could do push-pull legs, rest, and then you could do the Arnold split. So then you could do chest and back, shoulders and arms, and legs. So that's a really good way to split up your volume as well. What we mean by volume is the stuff you do. So you can have more volume if you do more sets. What we mean by set is, let me just illustrate it this way, right? If you're doing a bicep curl, it's a bit weird to show you, but if you're doing bicep curl, this is 1 rep. 1 rep, 2 reps, 3 reps. Let's say you do this for 10 reps. That's 1 set of 10 reps, right? So volume is sort of how many sets and reps you are doing. There's a lot to talk about, so there will be some cuts per, but it's just so that I can give you the most value possible. The next thing is intensity. So if we go back to that bicep curl, right? There's a point where you won't be able to do any more reps, so it might start to get a bit hard. You put in a bit of strain, and then you do one more, and you try, but you can't get it. That's failure. That's the point where you fail to complete the set. And in the gym, being a failure is what you want. It's a great thing because it means that you've stimulated yourself. Now, there's a few, muscle building can get a little bit complicated, but I'll just explain it this way. Basically, what you want to do is create little tears in your muscle by working them out. And then you rebuild those tears by water and energy and protein. So by training hard, you're able to make those micro tears, just little tears. It's not painful, man, don't worry. You can get a bit of soreness sometimes, but it's just that micro tears that you get. And it breaks down the muscle, but then you rebuild it bigger and stronger. So by training to failure, you're able to stimulate that more. But if you don't have to necessarily go all the way to that point, especially when you're doing big, heavy compound lifts like squats or bench press and deadlift, because at that point it's going to be really taxing on your body to do that. But if it's something like a smaller muscle group, so compounds are something that target a bunch of muscle groups. So the bench press, for example, targets the chest, targets the shoulders, it targets the triceps, even uses the lats a little bit, so there's part of the back, even uses your legs a bit. So the bench press uses a lot. Deadlifts use loads, it uses like loads of things, both as stabilizers and actual movers, right? Things that move the weight up. And squats, it uses loads of stuff, like basically every muscle in your legs, your core, your upper back for stability. So compound movements use a bunch of muscles, but isolation movements, or they're sometimes called accessories, they only use typically about 1 muscle. So if you're doing a bicep curl, you're only using the bicep, right? I mean, you might use the forearm a little bit, but you're using the bicep, you're isolating that. So when you're doing an isolation exercise, you can go a bit harder, you can go all the way to failure. But if it's something like a squat or a bench press or deadlifts, especially squats or deadlifts because they're a little bit more dangerous to go to failure, then you can go intense, but not all the way. You could be a few reps before that point. So the last deadlift rep, I can only really show you the top, but the last one, it should be a bit tough, but it shouldn't be something that really puts a lot of strain on you. So with the isolation movements, with the things where you're just targeting one muscle, you can go all the way to failure or close to it. But with compound lifts, with things that target a bunch of muscles, then besides maybe bench press, because you can get a spotter and someone to support you, but for squats and deadlifts especially, don't go all the way to failure, just keep it a bit shy of that. A key concept in the gym is progressive overload. What this means is that you want to increase how much you're doing over time. So that can be the sets, it can be the number of sets that you do, it can be the number of reps. So if we go for that bicep curl example again, if you're able to do 10 reps one session, the next session you could try for 11 reps. And the session after that you could try for 12 reps, and then you can push the weight up. So you can increase the weight, you can increase the reps, you can increase the sets, but there's other things you can do as well which are called intensifier techniques. So one of these is a drop set. And you don't have to be as much of a maniac as what I'm just going to describe to you, but this is an example. So there's this leg extension machine which works the quadriceps. So if you think about your legs, I can't really show you, but if you think about your legs, it's sort of where your thighs are at the front, that's the quadricep muscle. So there's a leg extension machine, you have your legs behind a pad and you push it up. So a drop set is when you do a heavier weight and then you take the weight down, and then you can do this multiple times as well. So I'll give you an example. Me and my friends, we like to do something called the drop set of death. You don't have to do something, we just like to call it that. It's not going to be that dangerous, but it just gives you a lot of intensity. Once you build up a bit, you can get to this mindset of just really pushing yourself. So we do this thing called the drop set of death. So on the leg extension, we'll start with 100 kg, we load it up with plates, and we push it up, hold it at the top, control it down. Push it up, hold it at the top, control it down. What this does is it just really burns it out, and we do this as many times as we can. Explode it up, hold it at the top, control it down, do that, do that, do that, and then we do that as many times as we can until we reach failure, and then we have a plate taken off, and we do that again with 80 kg, do that again with 80 kg as many times as we get, and it gets really hard. You keep pushing and you keep pushing, it gets really hard, right? And then you take a plate off, then we stop controlling it, we just stop banging it out, we stop doing as many as we can. So 60 kg, we just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. It gets really hard, it gets really hard, it gets really hard. We keep trying with it. And then 40 kg, we take another plate off and we do it again and again, and we push 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 and we keep doing it. And then we take another plate off and we do 20 kg and we start doing it again and again and again and again. And then when we can't do anymore, we hold it at the top. Then the other guy will start putting the plates back on. So 40 kg, 60 kg, 80 kg, 100 kg, and you have to resist that negative, you have to resist it. So that's a drop set. And it sounds absolutely crazy, you don't have to do that intensity just yet. I might film it for you. If you're becoming a bit more intermediate, then I'd recommend, if you want to have that mental strength and physical strength and really increase your quad strength, then 100% try that drop set of death, but only once you've built up to it. Make sure to drink a lot of water, make sure to breathe properly. I don't want to get anyone hurt, but it's not actually, I hope it doesn't actually cause death or anything, it shouldn't. As long as you breathe properly, and as long as you've built up to it, you can have that mental intensity. But drop set is doing that heavier weight and then lowering the weight. And then you can add some extra things as well, like a controlled negative by adding more weight onto it. And this leads on to the next point, which is the distinction between isometric, concentric, and eccentric. Sounds like big words, but it's just explaining how a movement is, right? So if we talk about the bicep curl, on the way up, the positive of the movement, that's the concentric, right? When you hold it at the top, that's the isometric, and when you control it on the negative, or if you just have the negative, that's the eccentric. So a good way to intensify is to hold at the top. So with that drop set of death, with that leg extension, you have an isometric hold, then an eccentric control. So concentric explode, like you explode it up on the positive, hold it at the top, and then control it down. And that can be an intensified technique as well. There's this other story, it's from a few days ago when I was in the gym. I'm going to this really hardcore gym right now because I just want to try some really good equipment and just be in that environment as well because it really pushes you. So I'm in this hardcore gym. I've just done a set of those preacher curls to failure. It's like this weird easy bar that you hold. It's called an easy bar. And you have this pad that you rest your biceps against. And you just like curl it up. And I did this really hard to failure. And this guy, he just shouted at me. He's absolutely jacked. He just shouted at me, superset. I was like, are you just hyped? Are you just saying that you're doing one? Or are you saying that I should do one? He was like, you should do one. And I was like, okay, let's do one, man. And he told me to do another set, another exercise, which is called hammer curls. So you sort of bring up your biceps like this. He told me to do those hammer curls. And superset is doing one exercise, and then with a little rest, you go straight into another exercise. Yeah, I forgot to mention that point. It's very little rest. If you increase the rest, it's either just going into a next set, it can be a back down set. So you can do a heavier set and then you can do a lighter weight set. So you have a heavier set and then a back down set. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with information here. You can take notes, you can pause the video. I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but it's just a bunch of information because I want you to have this. I want you to save a lot of time. So you can have that heavier set and then you can have a back down where you've rested for a bit and then do it. You can have a shorter rest, it's called a rest pause set. So you could do the same weight here. You could do, so on the 100 kg with the leg extension, you could do that. You could do that as many times as you can and then you rest maybe for like 30 seconds. So short period of rest and then you do it again. So there's a few different intensified techniques, but a superset is when you do one set of one exercise and then you do a different exercise with a little rest pretty much straight afterwards. So it can be a similar muscle, so it can still be the biceps, or you can switch it up a bit. You could do a bicep exercise, then a back exercise, then an abs exercise, and if you want to be really crazy, you could do like four exercises in your supersets. So you could do like a leg exercise after that, but that's a bit crazy. Only really for like maniac, advanced lifters, elite lifters really, but that's something you can do as well. There's a concept called time under tension. So if we think about that leg extension again, I was going to show you the bicep curl, but let's say the leg extension again. When you hold it at the top and then when you control it on the way down, all of that is putting your muscles under tension, and that's the time under tension. And if you're able to increase this, then you might be able to stimulate more muscle growth because you have that extra muscle damage. And muscle damage isn't the only thing that leads to muscle growth. There's something called mechanical tension, but this time under tension, that gives you that muscle damage and it gives you that mechanical tension because it puts your muscles under stress. And what that does is it allows them to be broken down, and then when you give yourself energy and protein and water, they're able to be built up again. So time under tension is a technique of increasing the intensity as well. So it's an intensified technique you can use by having more time under tension. And another thing you can do is pause reps. So you can pause a rep. So on the bench press, for example, you can pause it at the bottom and then press. Pause it at the bottom and then press. What that does, it just gives you a bit more of a stretch, adds a bit more intensity, and that's just a really good thing you can do as well. So how long should you rest? It depends on your goals and how much time you have. If you want it to be a bit more of like bang, 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 you do one exercise and then you rest a little bit, then you do another exercise. If you want to keep that high intensity and keep your heart rate up the whole time, then maybe about 30 seconds to a minute is good. But if you want to take your time a bit more, have a bunch of rest and train a bit more for strength and train for intensity, and you have the time, that you can do even 3 to 5 minutes even. But it depends on how much time you have. What I'd say is know how much time you can allocate, know how much time you can place to go to the gym, and based off of that, figure out the rest times you need to be able to do all the stuff that you want to do. So there's a bunch of training styles that exist out there, right? I'm only going to cover a few of them, but one of them is powerlifting. So with powerlifting, it's a sport and you can compete in this, and it's the best total you can get for the squat, the bench press and the deadlift based off your body weight class. So let's say you can squat 150 kg after going to the gym for some time, bench 100 kg and deadlift 200 kg. So if you add those together and if you do them to the competition standard, then that's a 450 kg total. And if your body weight is 82 kg, then you'd be in the under 83 kg class. There's a bunch of classes, I'm not going to tell you about all of those. If you're interested in powerlifting, you can go look at those. But that would be your total. And you have to compete against other people in the same weight class and have the best total that you can. So that's a nice little competition that you can do. There's a bunch of rules as well, like there's commands you have to follow. So with a bench press, for example, that's what I was just trying to show you. You have to wait for the command to start, and then you bring it down and you have to pause it, then you have the command to press, and then you have to rack it. So there's a bunch of rules as well, like with the deadlift you have to control it on the way down and you can't like hitch your like hips on the way up. So there's a bunch of rules too. On squats you have to get to the right depth, and if you follow these rules and if you have that standardization, then you can compete in that. And there's a bunch of things about that too, like calibrated plates that are guaranteed to weigh exactly how much they say they are. And there's like power bars that have really aggressive grip on them, which really helps you. God damn, bro, there's a lot to speak about in this video, but hopefully it's of value to you. My throat's getting a little bit dry already, but that's all good, man. The next training style is bodybuilding. Everyone knows about bodybuilding. It's about making that aesthetic physique. In particular, there's a bunch of muscles that you can emphasize as well if you just want that aesthetic physique as well. So the upper chest, for example, the lats, the traps, the neck. Yeah, neck training as well, that's the thing. You can emphasize these muscles, the core, the abs. You can train these, and bodybuilding is a sport where you compete with others. You don't have to compete, but if you do compete, it's a sport where you compete with others, and there's these criteria of aesthetics, of how you look, and you have to compete with others, and there's conditioning. Conditioning means how you appear on stage, and how low your body fat percentage is, and the way that you've been able to make your body look, and all of that stuff. So bodybuilding is a cool training style as well. There's another training style called calisthenics, which is really fun, and it's all about body weight exercises, mastering your body weight. So there's basic calisthenics and stuff like push-ups and sit-ups, and then slightly more advanced you have pull-ups and chin-ups. But then there's a bunch of skills too, like the front lever and the planche, and there's a bunch of other things too. And calisthenics is really cool. Just master your own body weight. A lot of them have really good physiques too, because you've got to be lean but really strong too. So that's a good training style as well. And you can combine some of these. You don't have to be limited to one of them. Obviously you'll make the most progress if you limit yourself to one of them in that thing. So if you want to be a powerlifter, only do powerlifting. If you want to be a bodybuilder, only do bodybuilding, really. But you can still make really good progress. And if you want to collect the infinity stones and have a bunch of physicality in different areas, then I'd recommend doing a combination of multiple. So for me, I like to do something called power building, which is where I'll focus on the powerlifting movements at the start, and then I'll do some more of the bodybuilding stuff. So I'll do those compound exercises, and I'll do those isolation exercises afterwards. But I also like calisthenics a lot. I like to do weighted chin-ups, I like to do weighted dips, I like to do hanging ab raises. I want to be able to learn skills in the future as well. So I'll do some calisthenics as well and combine those training styles. And for me, I find that that's really enjoyable. I'm able to make a lot of progress in my physique and my abilities that way. Form is really important. If you want to lift safely, if you want to lift the most that you can, if you want to reduce injury risk, because if you get injured, bro, you're out of the game and it's gonna really demotivate you and just mess things up. So don't let yourself get injured. Learn the right form. I'm not going to break down the form for everything here, but there's a few really good sources of information for that. So I'd recommend Jeff Nippard's Technique Tuesday series, that's really good, and Squat University as well, they're really good for that too. And you need to make sure that you warm up properly, right? Because by warming up properly, it means you're not going to overstress your muscles when you start to do heavier things, and it just means that you're able to lift a lot more safely and not put unnecessary strain on your muscles. So I'll explain the 100 kg bench warm-up that I did to get to that. So I did 20 kg for about 15 reps. I think I did 40 kg controlled for about 6 to 8 reps. Then I did 60 kg explosive for 4 reps. 80 kg just for 1 rep. And then I did the 100 kg. So at first you might be a bit confused. You might be thinking, how did Paras design that warm-up structure? But all it is a reverse pyramid. So as you increase the weight, you want to decrease the amounts of reps you do. The reason being is you don't want to get yourself fatigued. So if you can bench press 50 kg, you don't want to do 40 kg for 15 reps before that. That's just going to make you fatigued, and you might not even be able to do that many yet. And that's completely fine, of course, but you don't want to do too many reps. You don't want to get yourself fatigued. So, but you do want to stimulate your muscles enough to warm them up properly. So by doing that reverse pyramid, you're able to warm them up. And the reason I did controlled and explosive is just to work on positioning at first, and then just to warm up my type 2 muscle fibers. Type 2 are the ones that benefit more from explosive movements. Type 1 are a bit more endurance, and there's different genetics that people have, but you can sort of bias them based off your training styles as well. So if you do more endurance stuff, if you do more endurance running, you can tailor to your type 1 muscle fibers, but if you do more explosive training, you can tailor to your type 2 muscle fibers, and different muscles have a different mixture and different people have a different mixture. But if you train both of them with something like the bench press, if you warm up both of them, then that can help you a lot with being able to do the weight that you want to. So you do the warm-ups, and then you do the working sets. The working sets are the ones that aren't warm-ups basically. So you can do the warm-ups, then the working sets, and part of the working set can be what's called the back down set that we've talked about. So if I did that 100 kg for only 1 rep that time, the back down set I did was 85 for 5. So what that means is I lower the weight and I try and do more reps. And then after that 85 for 5, I did 80 kg for 8 reps. And the way you figure this out is sort of just by understanding the intensity that you're working at and sort of understanding the rep ranges that you want to be in. If you train a bit with the lower rep ranges, that's a bit more of strength. If you train a bit more with moderate rep ranges, there's a bit more hypertrophy, which is muscle building. If you train with very high rep ranges, like 15 plus, then that's endurance. But as long as you're training hard, you'll still build a lot of muscle and strength either way. With warming up, I'd recommend warming up your hips before doing squats or deadlifts, because that just really helps you to open up your hips and make sure that you can lock out with deadlifts properly and get to depths and squats. So that's really good as well. And with the bench press, if you're training a bit more in the powerlifting style, which I like to do, you can actually warm up your back beforehand. And this is a bit underrated, but if you warm up your back with a lat pull down or with chin ups, what that does is it gets your lats engaged. It helps warm them up. And when you're bench pressing, you press your lats back into the bench. That really helps as well. The next thing related to that is bench press form. So I'm not going to break down everything, but what I will say is that you want to have that slight arch. It's not cheating if you have a slight arch. It actually puts your shoulders in a much more comfortable position and your back as well. And it means you can press a lot more comfortably. You want to bring the bar to about your low to mid chest. You want to tuck your elbows. It's fine if your wrists come back a bit, that's perfectly fine. As you tuck your elbows properly, you get that nice range of motion all the way down and you press it up. So slightly forward and then slightly back and up. And what that does is it just gives you really good bench press form. With the leg drive, you want to engage your legs, you want to keep your knees pushed out, you want to engage your glutes. You sort of want to feel pressure going back and down. You want to have sort of a shelf that you can press against. Everything engaged. Your lats pressed against the bench. You want to feel your elbows pulling it down towards you. It's not just a push movement. You want to feel your elbows on the way down. Have your lats engaged and then you can press. And if you combine everything, if you brace properly as well, so having a big breath before, so having loads of air coming into your stomach and then exhaling forcefully on the way up, combining those things is just really good for bench press. How wide or narrow should your grip be? It depends on your leverages, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. Leverages is just to do with your limb length and your body proportions. So if you have sort of shorter arms and if you have narrow clavicles, then a bit of a narrow grip is probably good for you. If you have wider clavicles and if you have long arms like me, then probably a wider grip is good for you. But it sort of depends, experiment with what works for you, and that will help you a lot with your bench press form. Leading on from that, there's a point about range of motion. When do you want full range of motion and when is it fine to have it limited? So a lot of people with things like shoulder press especially, they'll have their elbows flared out and they only come down to about here. But what you want to do is have that tucked elbow, because it's better for your shoulder as well, and come for a nice deep stretch. You can flare them on the way up, but a nice deep stretch. And that gives you really good range of motion. But you don't necessarily need it all the time. If you're going close to failure, if you're doing a lat pull down, you go full range of motion, but towards the end you can have those half reps to push to intensity. But in general, full range of motion is what you want. There are some training styles where half reps are acceptable, like if you're doing bodybuilding, sometimes bench pressing, you won't like fully lock out, just try and press it in this place here. And with like boxing training, you can do quarter squats and things like that too, because you never need to squat to depth whilst you're doing boxing. But in general, try and go for full range of motion. Have that principle of tucking your elbows when you're doing a pressing movement, and that'll just help you a lot as well. And then we have deadlifts. So we have sumo and we have conventional. Sumo, is it cheating? I don't know, man, I don't know. But sumo is when you have a very wide stance with your legs, and conventional is when you have a much narrower stance. Basically what it is when you do conventional, your arms are outside your legs. But when you do sumo, your arms are inside your legs. and people dispute them, but they are both valid. They're both accepted by powerlifting and all of that. So as long as you still have some range of motion isn't the only thing that matters, because sumo and conventional, they are roughly the same in terms of difficulty. It depends on people's leverages, like how their body proportions are and the limbs. Sumo has less range of motion, but it's a lot harder off the floor. And roughly, it's about the same kind of difficulty. So range of motion isn't the only thing that matters, and that is explained by the sumo and conventional difference. But if we talk about deadlift form, there's just a few principles that I'll tell you about. Hopefully watch one of the videos by like Jeff Nippard or Squat University, as I said. But with deadlift form, you sort of want to have your chest facing forward, and you want to have your hips facing backwards. You want your glutes to face the wall in front of you, basically. Upper chest facing forward, glutes behind you. A little bit of back rounding is okay, but you just want to keep that neutral spine. Upper back rounding is a technique that people can use, but it's a bit more complicated. You just want that neutral spine. That will just help you out a lot more. And you want to push with your legs. You don't want to pull with your back. You want to push with your legs off the floor, and then you hinge your hips forward. And you can have different hip positions as well, depending on your leverages. Something you'll have to figure out. You can have a bit more of a higher hip position, then wedge them down, or you can start with a slightly lower hip position. Don't have a position that's a bit too low, because then you'll try and squat the deadlift, and that'll just not really be good for the leverage, and you'll be a bit weaker as well. With the deadlift, you can take a few grips. You can do a double overhand grip, so you can have both of your fists facing forward. I can't really show you because the camera's a bit high. You can have a mixed grip, or you can use something like straps on top of your hands to give you some more grip as well. So that's something you can do with the deadlift form. And yeah, I'll just briefly touch on squat form as well. So that, again, it depends on your leverages, it depends on your body, and we'll talk a little bit more about this soon. But a wider stance typically helps you if you have more flat feet, and if you have a bit worse ankle mobility, so wider stance can help you. Having your feet pointed out a bit more can help you as well. So you can have that wider base by pushing your hips back slightly before initiating. That helps too. If you have longer femurs, if you have a longer distance between your hips and your knees, then actually you want to be a bit less upright. It's a bit better for your stability in the squat. But if you have shorter femurs, then you can be a bit more upright. So it does depend on your leverages, because everyone's different. Not one training style is going to work for everyone. So you need to be able to figure that out too. And with squats, unless you're doing a specific kind of boxing training, for example, you do want to go to depth. You do want it so that you go to parallel. It's a bit hard to show you with my hands, but you want to have it so that your hip crease is below your knees. And it's fine if your knees go past your toes. A lot of people have this misconception that your knees can't go past your toes, but it's perfectly fine. A lot of the time it's a lot better if that happens, and it means you're able to get a much deeper stretch and much better positioning too. Another quick form tip is that the cue chest up is quite helpful all the time. So like we said with deadlifts, you want your upper chest facing the wall in front of you. With a bench press, you want to sort of bring your chest up as well, so you can press a bit more. With squats as well, if you have your chest a bit more upright, it helps you keep that back stability. With chin-ups as well, it helps you, or pull-ups as well, it helps you to sort of arch your back in the right kind of way and engage your lats better. So the chest up cue can help quite a lot with those movements as well. Genetics obviously matter, but don't let yourself be put down by them. Now, certain demographics, certain ethnicities, certain people, depending on their parents and their upbringing, their genetics and how they're expressed, which is called epigenetics, that will differ as well. That will be different. But for example, West Africans, for example, a lot of them have really good muscle building genetics, and they're able to keep low body fat percentages. And then South Asians, our genetics have been messed up a little bit by famines and things, so it's a lot easier for us to store body fat. But don't let these things put you down, because you can make amazing progress regardless. And even if you have subpar genetics, actualize that potential. Be the best that you could be, and you can still develop an amazing physique. Even if you have the bottom 1% genetics, if you have the absolute worst card that you could be dealt, even if you do 10 years of training, and even if you tried performance enhancing drugs, which I wouldn't recommend, even if you did that, maybe your potential is only to have a slightly above average physique. But how about you take out the performance enhancing drugs and you still do that anyway, because it's so much better than what you had at the beginning. And even if that just gives you an average physique, if you had bottom 1% genetics, that's an amazing thing to achieve. But genetics, we also have to understand that affects our leverages, it affects our body proportions, it affects how our bodies are framed, how things like fit together. So we have to bear in mind that everyone is different and there isn't one training style that is going to fit everyone. You have to learn the kinds of things that matter. For example, I have flat feet, so a lot of people, they have an arch in their feet as you're supposed to. Mine, they're flat, bro. They're fully like flat. And there's something called foot pronation, which is where they point outwards like this. I literally like walk like a penguin, yeah? So with that, I have to understand different things. So with deadlifts, I can sort of have a pretty straight stance. But when it comes to bench, to get the best leg drive, I have to be like almost 90 degrees. But don't fight the things you have. Like for me, I was trying to keep that more straight position. And with bench press leg drive, you probably should have it slightly outward. But for me, I need it very outward. And don't resist that. Especially if it's not something that you're worsening. Because for me, it's not really worsening it. It's just what I need to do to have the best thing. And for squats as well, I need that wide stance and more outward positioning. So it does depend on the person and your leverages. Like we said with squats, if you have longer femurs, especially like I do, this is something I learned, you actually benefit more from a less upright squat. If you're less upright, that's a lot better for your positioning. And if you have shorter arms, you'll probably be really good at the bench press, but you'll struggle a bit more with deadlifts. And if you have long arms and really long legs though, that might affect your deadlifts too, because you have to bring it up a high amount. But for deadlifts, if you have shorter legs and long arms, then you'll be really good at those. But at the same time, you might struggle a bit with bench press. So your leverages sort of determine the kinds of things that you're able to do, and your genetics will also affect your physical expression, your physique as well. Like your biceps, you might have a bit more of a rounded peak, a bit of a shorter peak, or you might have a longer peak. I sort of have one that's a bit in the middle. And you can have different amounts of abs as well. You know, I only have 4 abs, same as Arnold. But some people, they have, most people have about 6, but some people have 8, 10, a few even have 12 naturally. 12 abs, that's mental, isn't it? It sounds like something that would be like in some anime, it'd be like Baki Hanma or something, with 12 abs. But yeah, genetics, they really do play a role, but just, that shouldn't put you down. Like, yeah, obviously I'd like to have a 6-pack of abs or 8-pack of abs, because that looks cooler, but I have 4, that's what you got to deal with. And don't let that put you down. Even if you have South Asian genetics, you can make amazing progress. I mean, I've only been training for a bit over a year, and I've already been able to make a lot of really good progress. I'll be able to make a lot more. So just stay consistent. Don't let your genetics be a limiting factor. Understand that everyone is different. Understand that your leverages are going to be different and affect how you train. But that's part of the journey. You have a lot of time to figure out what works for you. And that's an amazing part of the process as well. Related to this point about leverages and about your genetics and how everyone's different, if you have a bit worse ankle mobility, something you can do in squats, for example, is to raise your heels. What that does, it just lets you get a bit deeper. Like if you try and squat and you sort of do it on your tiptoes, you might realize you can actually get a bit deeper. So by raising your heels, that can help you too if you have worse ankle mobility. Something else to know that some of you might not have known is that there's very key gender differences in training. So some of them are a bit more obvious, like men are going to have a lot more upper body strength. Lower body strength though is pretty similar, and a lot of women tend to be stronger than guys. A lot of guys be skipping legs. Don't be skipping legs, bro. A lot of guys be skipping legs. So women will a lot of the time be stronger than them. But something else you might not have known is that women can actually recover a bit better because of how their hormones work. I'm not fully sure about all of this, but there was a video by Jeff Nippard on this. I just remembered this point. And there are some very interesting gender differences that are important to know in terms of if you want to train with someone else, or if you want to help someone else get into training and they're of a different gender to you. Understand that gender difference and you'll be able to help them a lot more. Mind-muscle connection can be really useful because it helps you feel the muscle. And if you're able to get deeper stretches, you might be able to stimulate the muscle more. If you have more mental connection, we understand how powerful the mind is, right? If you have more mental connection to your muscles, you can probably do more with them and have more progress. I'm not exactly sure on the science and everything behind this, but I'm sure that if you have better mind-muscle connection, it's good for you as well. And you can do weird stuff like pec popping as well. Like if you've seen that video, which is like weird party tricks and fun things to do. But there's a few ways that you can stimulate mind-muscle connection. One of them is really squeezing it. So if you're doing like a bicep curl, really squeeze it at the top, like feel it. And that can really help with the mind-muscle connection there as well. With back exercises, pulling with your elbows. So if you feel things like back exercises like lat pull downs a lot in your forearms and biceps, try pulling with your elbows rather than trying to pull with your arms. It's more like a chain that you have. Your elbows are the driver, and that's really good as well. Something you can do with stuff like lat pull downs as well is having a thumb on top. So a thumb on top grip can just help you feel that as well. I found like for a few people, that's something that works too. And just to keep your joints stacked and really feel things where you're supposed to feel them, and just keep a really solid grip on things, you should try and squeeze one of your knuckles with your thumb if you can, if that helps you get a better grip. For me, I like to squeeze like either at this knuckle or on top. It just lets me get a really strong grip on things like the bench press or even biceps, anything that just needs to be gripped, which is basically everything in the gym. It just helps you get a really strong forearm grip on it, and that means that you can target the things that you want to and not let your forearms be a limiting factor. So that's a really useful tip for mind muscle connection as well. Also, if you want to learn how to pec pop, what you have to do for that, how I unlocked that was developing a very good mind muscle connection with my chest. And the main thing I did for that was incline dumbbell press, full range of motion, pausing it and getting that really deep stretch. So if you do want to learn how to pec pop, that's how to do it. Paused, incline bench, full range of motion. Keep trying to feel your chest. If you like put your hands together, you can sort of feel it contract. So if you want to learn how to pec pop, that's the way to do it. So we've been talking about the gym and we've been talking about training, but we know how important diet is for us to make the most progress that we can. And for me, my first priority initially was just to lose weight. So I thought, starve myself, only have 1,000 calories a day because that's what I needed to do, right? And I did lose a bunch of weight, but it was a lot of muscle, a lot of water. It was terrible for my energy, for my health, for my hormones. So lesson number 1 of diet is don't starve yourself. There's a calorie balance. If you eat the same amount of food over time and if your weight stays the same, that's your maintenance calories. If you eat some more, then that's a surplus. And if you eat less and you lose weight, that's a deficit. So if you want to bulk, if you want to put on muscle but you're also getting a little bit of fat, I'd recommend 200 to 500 calories above maintenance. That's a pretty good place to be. If you stay at maintenance, you can do something what's called a body recomposition, or Greg Doucette likes to call it main gaining. What that means is you can lose fat and put on muscle. It's a bit more slow, but it's a bit more sustainable. And if you get to a good body fat percentage, like 15%, then you can just maintain your weight and just keep on making progress from there. Or you can do cutting. So if you're a bit more overweight and if you have some body fat to lose, what you can do is eat in a deficit. So maybe 200 to 500 calories below maintenance is a pretty good amount. If you start to have a big deficit, if you start to starve yourself, that's not a good place to be. You'll just lose a bunch of muscle. You don't want to just lose a bunch of muscle. You want that body composition. You want to be leaner. And the higher your muscle is, the lower your body fat percentage is. If everything's equal, if you have 10 kg of fat and you start off with 5 kg of muscle and you over time get to 10 kg of muscle, your body fat percentage goes down and your muscle percentage goes up, because think about your body weight proportions. So you don't want to just lose weight. You want to change your body composition. You want to lose body fat. And that's the way to do it, by understanding that caloric balance and having a sustainable deficit or a sustainable surplus that doesn't cause you to binge eat, and just staying at that, and you'll be able to make a lot more progress. And then you can manipulate those when you need to. So you can do a bulk and then you can do a cut. So you can do a bulk cut cycle. A lot of people like to cut in the summer and then bulk in winter. Or you can do that thing where you main gain or body recomposition, and you just stay at the same amount of calories for the year, or you just stay at that for several months and you make progress from there. How much protein do you need? Well, based off the science and based off when you look at a bunch of things, it says that you actually only need 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So in kilograms, that would be about 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that's as much as you need to put on muscle. If you have a bit below that, you'll still be able to put on muscle, it just won't be as much. If you have above that, it won't have any extra muscle gains, but protein is a lot more satiating, makes you feel a lot more full, and it has something which is called the thermic effect of food, because in digesting protein, it burns more calories. So if you have a higher protein intake, you will be able to lose more calories through digestion. So if you're cutting, for example, you definitely want to keep your protein a bit higher, maybe closer to about 1 gram per pound of body weight or 2.2 grams per kilogram, just so that you feel a lot more satiated, you burn a few more calories in digestion, and you have enough protein to maintain the muscle whilst you lose your body fat. Camera died, bro, but now we're back. I started this with a full charge, but just by filming over this much period of time, it's just lost the energy, but now we're back. And the next thing to discuss is the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients. There's two types of nutrients, right? Macronutrients are carbs, protein, and fat, and the micronutrients are all the vitamins and minerals like vitamin A and vitamin B1 and vitamin B6 and vitamin B12, vitamin C, and then minerals like sodium, potassium, magnesium, iodine. So that's the kind of things that are the micronutrients. But with macronutrients, or macros as people like to call them, you can have a balance of them, how you split them up. Some people try and cut out carbs or fats, but I wouldn't recommend that, man. Because with carbs, they give you glycogen in your muscles, so that helps you be a lot more full, it gives you a lot more energy. Just have those complex carbs that are broken down and used properly. Don't have the refined ones that spike your blood sugar and mess with your insulin and all of that. So complex carbs and whole foods, those would be really good. Fats, don't cut them out completely. Moderate fat is pretty good as well, because fats are very important for your hormone health and testosterone and things like that. So fats and carbs, keep pretty moderate and make sure that those are from healthy sources. Like with fats, you've got saturated fat, which is fine in moderation, but beyond a certain point, it's bad for your heart health. Trans fats that come from fats having been refried, like if you refry something, or if there's hydrogenation, there's something that goes on there, then that creates these forms of fats called trans fats that are really not healthy at all, right? But mono unsaturated fat, what that means is like in the fat, like if you think about the chemical structure, mono means there's one double carbon to carbon bond. Chemistry, A-level biology, I still remember this stuff, right? And what that means is it packs less tightly. Polyunsaturated means that it packs even less tightly because there's a bunch of these double bonds, and that's just good for you as well. But a mixture of all of these kinds of fats, especially omega-3s and omega-6s, having a good ratio of those, you can look into that a bit more too. That's really good as well. So don't cut out fats, is very important for your hormone health. Protein, we've already discussed that, keep that pretty high, moderate to high, higher if you're on a calorie deficit, and that'll be good as well. Yeah, I can't lie, bro, the camera dying did throw me off a little bit. Tip for my creators out there, try and get into the flow of speaking. If you can speak like just to the camera without like filming anything necessarily, that will help you as well. It does take a little while to get back into the flow of things. But micronutrients, right? Micronutrients, very, very important for your health and things like that as well. Make sure to have a good balanced diet that has a bunch of micronutrients in there, fruits and vegetables, protein sources, lean protein sources, things like that, right? Have a good balance. Something that can help is multivitamins, and it's fine to take supplements, you know, because they can make things a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier to get all of the micronutrients you need. So if you take supplements just to ensure that everything is on point, then I don't see anything wrong in that. Obviously have a good diet as well, but if you have a good diet and then the insurance of supplements, especially ones that are a bit cheaper, multivitamins aren't too expensive, you can get some good like omega-3 supplements as well, like algae oil and stuff like that, so those are really solid, and if you have those supplements, it's good. But there are a bunch of scammy supplements out there as well that you should try and avoid. Things like BCAAs won't really help you that much, and like testosterone and things like that, but there are some good supplements as well. So ashwagandha, I don't really use it, but that's one of the ones that's been told to be pretty good. Protein powder, it can just help you get that protein in the day, so that can be good too. Multivitamins are pretty good as well. Creatine, is fine. It's not a steroid or anything. I'll explain how it works because I did do A-level biology in the UK here, so I do understand a bit of how this works. So in the body, you have this thing called ATP. This is sort of our energy molecule, right? Adenosine triphosphate. So it's this sort of this acid, amino acid, and it's got 3 phosphates, these little ions that are attached to it, these charged molecules. So you have these phosphate ions, and when one of those falls off, there's a release of energy by a hydrolysis reaction, and that releases a little bit of energy. So these phosphates, you want to bring them back in, reattach them to ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, reattach them, and then have them come off again, releasing energy. What creatine does is it brings in those phosphate ions, it brings in those charged phosphate molecules, and what that does is it allows you to regenerate ATP more quickly. What this means is that you're able to have a energy store that replenishes more. And what that does practically is it lets you push a little bit harder, 1 or 2 reps, it lets you recover a bit more, and it just means you have a little bit more energy that is stored and available for you to use. So creatine just brings that in. And if you have any side effects, obviously you just stop, but for the most part, as long as you have a reasonable dose of 3 to 5 grams a day, it should be fine. For a very small amount of people, it can cause balding if you have a propensity towards that. But if you have any side effects like that, just stop, and it'll be all fine. So yeah, that's creatine. Pre-workout is a pretty good supplement as well. Don't have too much caffeine, obviously, but if you just need that extra bang before a session, then pre-workout is really good for that as well. It has some things that just increase the amount of blood flow you have, just a bunch of caffeine as well. So pre-workout is a pretty good supplement as well. Another thing to know is that not all calories are equal. You can have 300 calories from something that's really unhealthy, like you can have some highly processed donut or something, or you can have 300 calories from a really healthy, balanced little part of a meal or something, right? So understand that not all calories are equal, and what you should aim towards is whole foods, things that haven't been overly processed. Some processing is fine, it's not processing itself that's necessarily bad. It's mainly just that processed foods themselves. They have a lot of saturated fat, they have a lot of salt, and that's not good for your heart health, that's not good for your blood flow. So just have things that are more whole foods, things that only have one ingredient, because then there's less chance of harmful ingredients being present because it's only one ingredient, it's only one thing that's present. It'll be a lot healthier generally, and it'll just have a much better balance of macronutrients and micronutrients. So yeah, not all calories are equal. There's a question of meal timing and meal frequency as well. Does it matter when you have a certain meal? How many meals should you have? To be honest, it doesn't really matter that much as long as you get enough calories, enough protein. I find that if I have multiple meals, it just helps me be a lot more full. But you can do things like intermittent fasting and just having one meal. You can break things up. I'd say if you're going before a workout, have that about an hour and a half before, so that you can digest it a bit. That's about a good amount of time to get the energy. There isn't like an anabolic window, like after a meal. Anabolic just means something that puts on muscle. There isn't really that much of that. Some people claim there is, but not really. So it doesn't really matter that much about when you have your meal afterwards, after a workout, but generally probably about 1 to 3 hours after a workout will be a good place to have a meal. And that is the stuff about meal timing and meal frequency. This has been a pretty long video, bro. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, but hopefully it's been valuable. Now we're in the bonus section and there's a few more things to talk about. So should you train by yourself or should you train with others? Training by yourself, you can get really good focus. Focus is underrated as hell in the gym, If you're able to focus and be present and not have other thoughts that are distracting you, then you can really increase your strength just by having that mental note and that visualization of what you're about to do, and just that focus, not being distracted. It really helps you with your strength and with your intensity as well. So by being by yourself, you can do that. You can have really good focus if you make sure just to be really honed in on the thing that you're doing. But when you're with others, there's the energy of hype. If you have people that are good, you can have an energy of hype, you can have them pushing you. If you have someone that's a bit more experienced, they can push you to train harder. So it sort of depends which one you want to go for. I think maybe you should have a mixture of both. Sometimes train by yourself, sometimes train with others. Don't really train with like more than 2 other people, then it gets a bit more hectic. It'll just take really damn long a lot of the time. Even with 3 people, it could take pretty long. So sometimes train by yourself just so you can be really focused. Sometimes train with others because it's fun and you get the hype. You also get to see your bros like progress, and that's just a really wholesome thing as well. Bro, you've been neglecting cardio, haven't you? Do not be neglecting cardio. As well as going to the gym, make sure to do at least probably a few hours of cardiovascular exercise a week. For me personally, I like to go for runs. So earlier today, before I started filming this, I went for a run again. And I'm just trying to get into that as well because I want to be someone who's physically fit and healthy. If you only care about the gym, then you won't really be as healthy as you could be because there's other aspects of health. There's cardiovascular fitness, there's your flexibility, how much you're able to move, martial arts, things like that as well. So bear that in mind and don't neglect cardio. It'll help you a lot as well with your fitness goals. It doesn't really kill your gains if you don't overdo it. Doing cardio a few times a week is a really good thing to do. Steps especially, try and walk outside more. Being outside too, touching some grass is good for your brain, it's good for your health. So try and walk as much as you can. I'll be honest bro, I've been neglecting going on walks quite a bit recently. I need to get back into that. It's really good to go for like 10,000 steps a day. About 12,000 apparently is about the best in terms of longevity and health. So yeah, go on walks, do your cardio, do some form of intense cardio as well. Just really good for your heart health, and in general, don't neglect it. Do you need straps and wrist straps and knee sleeves and all of that other equipment? You can use that. It can make things a lot easier. For me, I like to go raw as much as I can just because it feels really good and you get to develop that grip strength by yourself. But a lot of the times, if you use something like wrist straps, especially if you get wrist pain, it can be really beneficial. Knee sleeves as well if you get knee pain or if you just want to have better knee stability in squats. I haven't really used them, so I can't really tell you that much about them. Straps as well, they can just help your grip. If your grip is a limiting factor a lot of the times and you just want to train for strength in certain things and you don't really care too much about developing that extra bit of forearm strength just from holding heavier weights and you train your forearms otherwise, then straps are a good way to go as well. And in powerlifting, a lot of the time people use chalk for their grip as well. If you put chalk on your hands, then you can grip a lot more firmly. And another thing in powerlifting that a lot of people use too is like ammonia or smelling salts. They're terrible to smell. They smell horrible, but they can just bang you out. As in, like, they can energize you massively if you want to go for a PR. But I'd recommend not using them too much. They smell horrible as well, but those are some accessories and bonuses that you can use. And yeah bro, equipment does matter man, equipment does matter. So I've been training at this really hardcore gym. There'll be some videos coming soon by the way. I've been training at this really hardcore gym and the equipment is really damn good. Like the grip on everything is amazing. And if you have really good grip on things, if you have really good equipment, obviously you're going to be a bit more strong. It's a bit of a learning curve to adjust to different equipment. I've only been going to the gym for a little while now, so I do need to get used to it. But equipment does matter, so bear in mind that if you have worse equipment, it'll still get the job done, but if you have better equipment, it'll feel better. It's normally more expensive to access, right? But having that better equipment does matter. There is a difference in healthy body fat percentage between men and women. So for women, it'll be a bit more in the higher range because they need to store more body fat on them to be healthy. So 20 to 30% body fat is healthy for women. For guys, it'll generally be about 10 to 20%. The way you can figure this out is by learning how body fat works. Generally speaking, you'll have visible abs at around 15% for guys and about 20-ish% for women. For women, generally, visible abs aren't as healthy unless you have specific genetics that allow you to be at lower body fat percentage. But you don't have to be shredded or anything. If you go below 10% as a man and generally below about 20% as a woman, you do see changes, and you do see that your energy and your libido and your hormones and things go down. So in general, keep your body fat percentage in that healthy range. It'll be a bit different for different people. Some guys might be completely healthy at 9% even, but other guys might have to stay at 20% to stay healthy. So keep that in mind about body fat percentage. And the last point, steroids and performance enhancing drugs. Don't use them. They're the most justifiable, I guess, if you've trained for a long period of time, you have elite genetics, and you want to compete and take it to the next level, then it's somewhat justified, but even then it's terrible for your health. There's massive risks of heart health. And the thing is, with steroids, with a physique, if you keep chasing more, you'll never be satisfied. Steroids will not solve that for you. They're only really justified if you're competing, but even then, just the risks to your health are not worth it. Stay natural, keep your health, because we want health, we want longevity. So for the vast majority of us, never consider steroids. Your natural potential, you'll be able to achieve a lot anyway. And that is the last point of this video. It's been a long one, but yes, this video is finally done. 69 different points that I had in my journal, right? And now we're finally done with this. I hope it's been of value to you. And remember, bro, keep improving.